Royce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask Mr. Gruenberg a question. I've heard from several banks out in California that they're concerned with the treatment of commercial real estate loans. And I think we're talking about roughly $3 trillion in commercial real estate loans right now that are either on the books of the bank's balance sheets or securitized through MBS. And if the figures are right, I think roughly $1.4 trillion across the country is scheduled to roll over between now and 2013. Would that be?
I don't know that. I don't know that number, Congressman.
But or maybe Mr. Dugan would know. But what I've heard from local banks is that once the term of a loan rolls over, let's say it's typically 5 years, the lender is required to do a new appraisal of the property's value. And some of the banks have conveyed to me that while they'd like to roll the loan over, because the revenue coming, from the property remains strong, they are being discouraged from doing so by the examiners because, frankly, the appraisal value, obviously, of the property is not coming in at what it was. And I'd like to get your assessment of this potential dilemma here. If a property is dropped in value, but the revenue stream coming from the property is consistent, how should the loan be treated? I understand these loans need to be treated on a case-by-case basis, but in general, I'd like to ask Mr. Dugan and Mr. Gruenberg of the FDIC, should the bank make that assessment, or is that a question for the bank's judgment? Or do we suggest instead that because of the current appraisal that we basically have the regulators lean in and send the message to the bank that let me just ask you just forthrightly, how do you think that should be resolved if you have that judgment question?
Well, in the first instance, on an individual loan, we would defer to the judgment of the bank. It's really the bank's responsibility to make an assessment on the quality and creditworthiness of the loan and a judgment as to how to proceed if the term is expiring. As a general matter, and this is really one of the key issues in the guidance that we've issued, we've tried to send a clear message to examiners that if there's a drop in the collateral value, but the borrower is otherwise in a position to carry the loan, the guidance is very clear that the collateral alone should not be the basis for evaluating the borrower's position. And that's the message we have gone to great lengths to communicate to our examiners across the country. And there may be individual cases where that's not being followed. It's our impression that examiners are trying hard to work with borrowers on that issue.
There are certainly some individual cases, or at least as represented to me, there were, and I don't know exactly. I wasn't there to hear how it was communicated, but maybe there was just an assistance that things be better capitalized than there. But the representation I heard was that there was this message. I'd ask Mr. Dugan for his thoughts on this too, Comptroller Dugan.
I think the way I agree with what Director Gruenberg said. I think the issue that we will always look at, and we expect the banks to look at in the first instance, is the cash flow adequate, accompanied by the secondary sources, if they're guarantors, to repay the loan. That's the key issue.
But let me give you an example, because in talking to one banker, he said, well, the theory was that the cash flow was currently adequate, but in that particular market, the presumption was that in the future it might not be adequate. And the question to me was this: does the banker get to make that decision, or is that suggestion being made to the regulator? Yes, currently, indeed, you have a performing asset, or whatever terminology you use. You have the income flow, but we anticipate that with the implosion, let's say, in the Inland Empire in California, that come next year you may not, and therefore. This is what I'm trying to discern, because we all hear anecdotal information about this, and getting to the root of it is interesting.
And we hear that anecdotal information as well, as you might imagine.
Right.
There certainly is no policy to say that because of a speculative future drop in income,
Yes.
that the examiner says that that is the cause of why you have to write this down. But
Yes.
we also do expect our banks to stress their portfolios, make sure they're taking into account potential real-world issues that are going on currently in the marketplace. And it is hard to respond without having the particular
Sure.
instance in front of us. But I would say we welcome that discussion, and if it's not happening at the field level, we welcome them taking it up the chain, both informally and also to, if necessary, to our ombudsman, because I hear the same issues, and I am constantly talking to our supervisors and examiners, are we getting this right? And we constantly then will go back, ask questions. And I think this recent guidance did try to get at a number of these specific things with real-world examples that I hope would be good ones. And if I could just say one other thing. I think there is also, we have a hard time getting across the message that even if a loan is criticized, it doesn't mean you still don't